you say go live. Are we technically being recorded before the light goes on? Not that it matters, I'm just curious.
It can start recording before the light goes on.
That's why you're here.
Okay. Let's go ahead and get started. We appreciate your patience. We were a few minutes late getting started, but we will go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you very much. I've asked Commissioner Daly to give a thought or a legislative prayer, so I will turn the time over to him.
Great, real quickly, we'll do both, but we're going to continue with my theme. We're going to go with some history here. This is our favorite, our great Centerville, Utah book. I don't know if you don't have this, you should get one. It's really great. But talking about Main Street, that's where we wanted to go with here. Just to kind of, I wanted to highlight a couple of things real quick on Main Street. One of the first main stores in Centerville was the Co-op building. That's the one that Corey was trying to think of a minute ago with now it has a mural on the side of it, the Co-op building. That building that's there now was built in 1909. That was the hub of commercial Centerville back in the day. After the Co-op closed, it was a lumber yard, then a drive-through restaurant, gasp, and then other businesses. Now it's a CPA office and a design office, right?
Amazing how that drive-through didn't last. That's great.
Nice. That's pretty great. One other interesting, funny story that about that building is that was where the first phone in Centerville was installed. And what would happen is somebody could receive a call at the store. They'd send a runner off to your house to tell you, hey, you've got a call in the store, and then you had to come to the store to take your call.
When was that? Does it say when the first phone was put in?
1996.
No, I think, I can't remember where I saw that, but that was probably the early 1900s,
Yeah, wow.
late 1800s, early 1900s. So then some of the other interesting things that happened along Main Street as well were the building that is now Don's Meats was a grocery store. It was started by Joel Smith, and it was called Smith's Savings Center, with an S. So, and then after that, it was the post office, and of course now it's Don's Meats. So there's been a whole bunch of different, as we've talked about, hodgepodge of buildings and things along Main Street. Most of it does center right around there, Center Street, First South, First North, whatever, Main Street. But all sorts of interesting things, and if you want to read more about it, it's in this fantastic book. So with that, I'll offer a brief prayer. Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank Thee for the opportunity we have to gather as a planning commission and to discuss the issues of the city and to help plan and design for ourselves now and for the future. We ask Thee to bless that we can continue to work together well as a group, and that we can listen to each other's ideas and collaborate, and that we can do what is best for the community. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you very much. Kevin, I always look forward to your history. I do. So I appreciate you for bringing that. So the next item on our agenda is to review and accept the minutes, and I'm going to propose that we table this until the end of our meeting. Any objections?
Support.
Okay.
Actually, I was wondering if we could just give some feedback to Mackenzie to do that always, and then we've also put in with each business item, we've always put in if it's administrative or legislative for the public.
Right. We have a new person doing this.
It's
and
not
so,
Mackenzie.
It's not me.
It's not you.
Mackenzie.
Okay.
But yeah, we can add that back in. Donna's substituted with the missing, and so she's trying to use other agendas to set things up.
That's
and it's
fine.
kind of changed.
But noted.
No
Yeah.
worries
So
at all.
noted.
So just swap the meeting minutes always to the end and then add those other things. Great.
So not a big deal at all. We can roll with the punches here. I mean, we appreciate her for stepping up
Yes,
and doing
we
that
do.
for us.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's push that one to the end, and let's go next to the next item on the agenda, which is the final site plan amendment for the South Davis Metro Fire Station 83. So we're going to be considering that. to make changes to landscaping and site improvements on the property that's located at 343 South Main Street. I will turn the time over to staff.
Thank you, Chair Hayman. Members of the commission, as indicated, you are looking at a final site plan approval, which is administrative. The fire district has filed their application, and you saw the conceptual a meeting ago, I believe, and to move forward. So you'll see the exhibits that are associated in your report, and then I've tried to highlight the elements that were needed to be completed for final site plan. They have chosen the substitute route for the trees, and they have verified that the additional tree is in the front yard. I think it's a flowering pear or something of that nature is in the front yard, so that counts towards the street tree element. And so that completes the substitute. Now that will be, they can substitute up to 25% of the required trees, so they're going to go to the max of the 25%. And substitute it with shrubs. They have a lot of shrubs, so there's not a problem with the substitution. That's not a landscape waiver. A landscape waiver would be different. This is just the allowance administratively to substitute trees, and they've chosen that route. So at this point, there are no other changes to the site plan. So we're recommending that you approve it, and it's subject to the conditions, one, that this is for the amendment as submitted to the commission, and that all the other previous conditions remain in effect.
Great. Thank you so much, Corey. Any questions for staff? If not, we'll invite the applicant to step forward if you'd like to do so. You don't have to. All right? Nope.
Unless there's any questions I can answer.
No?
No, I just have one comment that I really actually appreciate the substitution instead of just applying for a waiver, because especially in a project like this, you know, the waiver almost feels like we're giving up type of a thing. So I really appreciate that it's not a waiver. So.
All right. Looks like no one else has any questions for you, so you're off the hook. You certainly don't have to stand up. This one has not been scheduled for a public hearing, so any further questions for staff or any further discussion? If not, the chair will entertain a motion.
I hereby make a motion for the Planning Commission to approve the final site plan to amend the original SDMFD Station Number 83 final site plan of September 2018, subject to conditions 1 and 2 in the staff report with suggested reasons for action A and B.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate? If not, we'll start with Commissioner Daly.
Aye.
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 It passes. Thank you so much. All right, moving right along to the next item on our agenda. So we are continuing our discussion of the drafting of the South Main Street Corridor Plan rewrite. So we're going to be discussing the various proposed concepts and draft language and give the city staff further direction. So I will turn the time back over to staff.
Thank you, Chair Hayman. As Commission has indicated, there's two elements to what we're addressing tonight. The first one is the logistical schedule. I'm hoping for some feedback if you feel frustrated with the schedule, because I changed it about 8 times trying to fit in what I thought were elements that would give you time to address it in your regular meeting, but sufficiently give you time to really vet out the plan document. I think this process has been different than going out and hiring a consultant or just having staff draft something and then run it through the process and change it as you seem necessary. We're actually using your hat as a citizen planner in this process. And I think that that works well, because we're not necessarily starting anew. We're just refiguring out what we're doing with the corridor. And because we did that.
That was my question. Are we going for a full rewrite here?
Yes, your movement and choice was to rewrite the general plan and the zoning ordinance.
I like it.
Not the overlay,
Yes,
the whole thing.
the whole thing.
Okay.
That was the choice you made with the work session with the council, is to revamp the plan. So we're revamping the plan and revamping the associated overlay ordinance to it. I tried to talk you out of the overlay
No,
just a
well,
little bit.
revamping the plan, does that mean completely rewriting? That's what I'm surprised about.
No, we're
completely
completely, 'cause
rewriting.
it's all based on the urban, or on the form-based code. So, yeah, I can bring you back your decision in the minutes if you'd like, but
Hey, I have a question, and maybe it's not directly related to the schedule, but are we planning on meeting on the July 24th? The evening of July 24th?
No, we are 23rd.
sorry, I put
I hope not.
4 in there. It's the 3rd. It is.
Oh, okay.
It is the 23rd.
The other schedule she sent out earlier was the 23rd.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what I get when I'm drafting and going off of dates and, 24th.
Well, that's why I just noticed it in here, actually, the other day when I was looking at this, and I was like, are we meeting on the 24th?
23rd, sorry, that's a text error.
Man,
July 24th
Corey
is
is a
always
slave
important.
driver.
He
Corey
is.
is cracking the whip.
Well, I make people come on their anniversary, apparently.
Huh? It's true. See, he's just not me.
Treat everybody fair, right? The schedule takes you out quite a ways.
Yeah.
And I think this was a response, we had kind of a hurried schedule, and I think the commission said, whoa, let's time out a little bit, let's take a little bit more thorough vetting for this process. And so this, I'm anticipating accomplish that message that I received. So we'd kick off tonight, and that one is to look at the schedule. It obviously will be flexible, because if you can't get it, if we have a heavy planning commission night for items coming in, which we haven't experienced yet, but if we do, obviously that's going to change your response. But I tried to write something that by the November meeting or the December meeting, you'd be wrapping it up and preparing a recommendation. That takes us after the election. I know the council was wanting something way before, so it wouldn't center around the election, but I think this carries us past the election. So we may have some pickup with the council if it changes to bring them up to speed, but gives them time after the election or the start of the new calendar year to decide how to address a recommendation from the commission. So,
But Corey, that is actually a good point, and I do have a little bit of concern with the election, that by not getting this done before the election, we may very well end up essentially starting over if there's a change in the makeup of the council.
but that is certainly a risk. It would take some effort, particularly on staff's part, to bring and ensure that if there's a change on the council, bring them up to speed where, as they get on board where everything is at. The risk factor would be if there are matters that any new council member may bring up, we may be bringing back some remands to the commission if there's some significant disagreement. So you're right, there's a risk factor, but that would be a remand back to address some issues.
I actually viewed it as a benefit for what it's worth, because I know the last time we went through the South Main Street plan, it got pushed through by one council, and then a new council came on board and did not agree with it. So this way, we're not passing something only to have to start over again. I mean, at least we should have a pretty good sense, at least for the next 2-year period, what it is going to be. And if that requires us to have to come back and make some tweaks, fine, so be it. But I viewed pushing it out past the election as a good thing for what it's worth.
Okay.
I also view it as a good thing because last time this was used as a little bit more of a political way to divide. And so I think this is us taking it slowly helps the public and people be completely involved and can hopefully minimize what might be hearsay or things like that, and allow people to have adequate time to understand it.
For what it's worth, I thought that the order that you've laid out here, Corey, makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad to hear you say that there should be some room for adjustment here, because I thought, well, if we're going to push it out until after the election, and we did want to take the time to do it the right way, which I still feel very strongly about, if we're going to do this, let's do it right. I say let's not try to stick super hard and fast to these dates. I mean, obviously we want to move it along, and I don't want to push it out for forever, but I think that we should be flexible so that if we feel like we need to take a little bit more time on any one of these, I don't think that we should have heartburn about saying, okay, we're going to
agreed.
stop and think about this one before we move on to the next.
Yeah, I mean, the termination of this schedule was just driven by you only meet once in November and once in December. So I was thinking, well, how do I set up a work schedule that potentially could meet
There.
that, but, if it carries over, that's, because there may be a section, and I particularly think by the time we get to the zoning ordinance, there's some sections that you'll probably take a little bit of the time on.
Yeah.
I think the generalities can hit a lot of speed through with the plan. I mean, I don't want to say it's speeding through, but they're more generalized views and statements, and then you take those and implement with the zoning ordinance, and I think that zoning ordinance is a little hurried in the schedule. So I anticipate, and I also anticipated that we might get some applications that one meeting just won't be a significant amount of time. So,
Like maybe if we spend an hour and a half talking about a 2-paragraph subdivision ordinance, something like that. She's not paying attention to me. That's okay. Lisa, I'm just giving
that's
you a hard time.
forewarning for later item tonight. It might be controversial.
No.
Can I make a recommendation, sort of, again, along the lines of what we were just talking about? I think using the words that you have here that say discussing and refining and things like that, I think those are important, that we make sure that those are the verbiage that we use instead of rewriting it completely, because there is there are some strong feelings, I think, for saying we're scrapping it all together and we're rewriting it completely, could give a sense of panic, either from either side of how you feel about it. So perhaps a better way is to stick with what you've put here so that we can understand that we're refining it, we're discussing about these things, and hopefully diffuse.
I agree with you, so there's not a sense of panic, but I don't want to paint the picture that you are not going in and doing a significant revamp.
We are.
Because we have decided between the two groups that we are not sticking with the current form-based elements.
Right.
And that's what everything has been built on. The general plan's been built on that, and the zoning ordinance has been built on that. So it is a significant revamp. Maybe that's a better way to say it, but it's a significant change.
But at the same time, use list could be, we talked about that. You can talk about design elements. You can talk about all of these things that could work with several different types of plans. So I just think we need to be careful about raising a warning flag to either people who support or don't support the plan. I think it's just good that we continue that discussion in a way that's diffusing.
Understand, but I just want to be transparent.
I am being
We are moving
transparent.
away from the last element. We're moving significantly away. Now, whether you vote for that in the end is a different story. So those who support the original or significant elements of that, even on the commission, need to make your case as the group.
Right.
But the group is considering a significant revamp of those two documents.
And we have been considering significant things such as uses and other things for some time now.
Yeah, but the uses will come as part of the implementation of the zoning ordinance, and we'll address that then. Because we're still keeping the overlay. We're
Right.
not changing use list with these two documents.
Right.
You can change the use list with those documents.
documents.
But
And I also want to make clear, when you say that both the city council and the planning commission have decided to change this, that the planning commission is supporting the city council's
Yeah, that's
desire to
fine.
change the form-based code.
right.
Okay,
But what I'm trying to say is the two bodies agreed to move
Right.
this direction.
Yeah,
all right.
Whether everybody votes for it
right.
is totally yet to be seen.
Because we as a planning commission had sent something different up to the city council, but we are a planning commission that works with our city council, and so if they want to go a different direction, we will cooperate and support them to the best extent that we
Correct.
can on that.
Correct.
Did anybody else, in reviewing this proposed schedule that Corey put together, does anybody have any questions or concerns about just the general flow of it? Not maybe the specific dates that he's included, but the way that he envisions that we'll lay this out.
I wish it could go faster. I wish there was a way to make it go faster. I think I think there's a little bit of a false dichotomy presented that it's a total massive revamp. I think you can piecemeal it in. I wish there was a way we could do bits and pieces. The elephant bite thing. I know we got slammed at City Council when we tried that, but yeah, my concerns. I read this as I thought, dang, we've been talking about, thinking about, discussing about, reviewing about, coming about, thinking about pushing this to December is what I read, and you know I know planning is a long process.
I agree with you, but let me recall to you, this group agreed to the 5 elements that we put into there. Those don't exist. Those don't exist. There's some areas that are kind of close, but that whole vision that we agreed to with the 5 elements, so you got the corridor wide, you got the north, we kept some of the flavor of the districts, but it is a very different direction. And so my view is that we're not just taking a couple of things and changing it. We're readdressing, so we're shrinking the size down so it's not as extensive as the old plan was. So that's a significant elimination of other elements of the general plan. The north gateway is going away, the south gateway is going away, the residential district is going away. Mm-hmm. That's not insignificant. And then we take in the traditional and city center and we're revamping that into a different set of parameters. So that's not a plug and play, that's a reconsideration.
And I think it was clear that that's the direction the bodies were moving. You presented to us a framework of how to do this based on your input from both groups and your planning professional experience. Tactfully, I've tried to interject throughout the process. And you know, I voted once or twice against the general body of the Planning Commission and the City Council. So that's a concern that just comes up. And I know it probably doesn't represent the instruction you felt you got from both bodies, but that's just my sense. And in some way, if, I don't know, what's the point of a council here if you don't speak your mind? So I just want to make sure.
I agree. I just want to make sure that, you know, I sense some pullback, yeah. and I can freely give you some pullback, but that pullback can't be changing this direction. You just have to go this direction and make your arguments accordingly with this direction. That's all I'm trying to say.
Well, I guess I think I was just a little bit taken aback that I feel like we talked about stuff and maybe there were some concerns we individually had, but then to me it sort of feels like, and then wow, like all of a sudden totally different, and I'm like, whoa, that's not what I was trying to communicate. Like I for sure am wanting to look at all of these things to follow what the City Council has directed us to do, but I'm not sure that not about taking a long time, I'm not sure that I agree specifically with Logan about that, but I agree with him in the fact that I may not agree that we are scrapping the whole thing, because that to me feels pretty extensive.
Well, I think it's a time for you as a commission to debate, because that's the direction we're heading.
Yeah. If there are parts of the existing plan that you feel strongly about that will fit into this new framework, I think that we should look at that. I mean, I don't think that we necessarily have to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
No, you can salvage what you think's in
Sure.
there and reframe it into this direction. I'm not saying that's happening, but we are significantly changing, significantly revamping. So if this commission as a body is uncomfortable with that direction, this is the time to speak it, because this is the direction that everything's been set up to go. So if you're concerned about that, voice it. And if a group, you agree that it's too much, then let's go reset it.
I like the idea of starting with a clean slate, and if we want to borrow some element or, you know, continue some elements from before, we can do that, but we're going to decide that that's what we want to do. Let's start over. That way we don't leave something in that just kind of hung around because it just hung around. We're going to consciously say, yes, we like this. This is going to stay. But it also gives us a chance to talk about it. So I like the idea of just starting over and let's make it our own plan and not just kind of trying to work our ideas into the old plan. So I like it.
Well, Corey, you had on the list for today, so we had the opportunity to meet with the Landmarks Commission, which I thought was incredibly helpful. I really appreciate your presentation on the historic aspects. of Centerville. I learned a lot, and I really appreciated the feedback that we got, because now I'm thinking, okay, I think I have some ideas now about some design elements that we can include, things that will help create a character and a unique Centerville feel along the main street that aren't going to be cost prohibitive, that won't, require a lot of investment by property owners into something. So I thought that that was really helpful. And the next thing that you have for us doing today is to review the various comments of in the past regarding the Main Street list, which I know you've put together here for us, and to identify some overarching themes and ideas. So I would suggest that let's just dive right into that and move forward.
Okay, the setup, so you know the background, in our West Side Plan, in our Shorelands Commerce Park and its overlay zone, and even a few elements of the South Main Street corridor, we developed with the different committees that worked in that process. We developed some guiding principles or some foundation statements, things of that nature that you check against. This is what we're starting with, this is what we've reached out to discover, and we're going to measure it against that. And if we don't agree with it, this is the discovery route that we took to not agree with it. If we do agree with it, this is the direction that we took that. And one thing that I didn't want to disregard is your effort in use parameters, because I think we heard it again tonight. If we don't know what the uses are, then we really don't know what the design's going to be, and they really are intertwined. Although I do think the use is fundamental, because you can have a commercial design in all kinds of forms. It's just a matter of, is it commercial, is it residential, is it mixed use, is it something different? So, but they are somewhat tied together, and as I recall last summer when we had the three meetings, we had the first one with the property owners and business owners. The second public meeting was with the local residents, and then the third meeting was where we advertised the general public at whole. And I think we had 37 or so comments generated from that, and a lot of them were beyond the uses. So I thought what would be entertaining as well as a setup. When you create a corridor plan, you usually justify what you're doing with that corridor. And so I thought that effort with the property owners shouldn't be just put aside. And even though we're coming back a summer later, I think their comments are still relevant to what happened in our experience, so that we can, because we invited them to participate, and our planning effort is directly affecting the people we tried to get information from. So rather than focus on, design and some other things, I think if we could go in and encapsulate what you thought you heard for those who participated. I know it's kind of a long memory, so what I've created for you is, for tonight, we will work off the independent list, the two side. I tried to break them up into generalized topics. I don't think they're hard and fast, but I tried to break them up into topics, and we'll work off of that sheet. But if you wanted to know the context and who said what, at least you get from which group that it came from, a property owner, a local resident, or the general public at large. And I thought as you go forward from here on out, you can kind of keep those checkpoints in mind of what people said in that corridor. And so if I can step down, what I'd like to do logistically is just put the sheets behind that we had at those meetings and start anew. And just kind of, the best way I organized it, we can change it, but like the first element's community identity. A lot of statements in there. Let's create some buzzwords, buzz phrases, what we think we're hearing, and then maybe create a statement or two about those buzzwords. Rough, it doesn't have to be perfected, and I will refine those ideas and create that as kind of a baseline, what we heard from the public. And then we can vet against what we've heard, and as we come up with different elements and ideas, we're eventually going to reach out to the public. And I think this is the part where we said we've been taking some of the previous considerations in our planning for the corridor. So This is generally what you do with the public. When you have a charrette, the French word is a little group that gets together, and the whole concept is that the whole is greater than the individual. I'm not smart enough, even I think I'm smart as a planner, but I'm not smart enough to have all the answers. There's no way, because I have a particular viewpoint. And so the group as a whole is going to be smarter than the planner just punching out a bunch of things at the computer. And I think the public as a whole helps us. So this is the idea of getting the public involved. And so I thought we'd just start with a go over here to mic. I've created a hot mic for the public on YouTube. So hopefully they can hear me a little bit. So we click the chart, and we would start, from my mind, kind of read through 1 through 10, and let's create some buzzwords or phrases that generalize what we're hearing in those comments, rather than individualize every comment.
Historic.
I'd go with quaint.
Yeah, local. Feel.
Feel?
People talk about how they want it to feel.
I think there's a lot to talk about respect. Respecting residents, respecting businesses, respecting the history.
Yeah, that idea of blending.
More blending in there as a buzzword?
Sure, put blend in there.
Yeah,
So
I
then-
agree.
Yeah.
Any of the buzzwords? We don't have to be perfect in here. This is not an idea.
Community. I mean, we identify it as community identity, but I think it's important that we remember that it is part of a community.
Yeah.
Maybe that goes with blending.
They
all right.
probably will overlap.
I'll overlap.
So there's those a few trigger words. Now, if you were to try to write an impression from the information and these words, what would be a statement of impression that you would have?
Craig, I feel like I'm in English class, and this is a writing
I know you are.
assignment.
Planning.
I'm not the teacher.
How about this?
I'll submit this to somebody that'll critique it.
Planning for the future and preserving the past, which is part of our Centerville City mission statement.
Oh dear.
Oh my goodness.
If you use that,
I'm just joking.
but if you think about some of those words and those statements, if you just wanted to say that you're the person in the reporter and they're asking you a question, what did the public say at that meeting?
Well, I would say that we are attempting to respect the local historic feel of our community.
Can you respect what? The local?
The local historic feel of our community.
You might as well say of our quaint blended community.
I know, I was
Yeah.
just gonna say, like, just put them all in there, right?
Although for me, when Corey asked that, I don't know, quaint and blended didn't really pop for me personally.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Right?
sometimes you have to create a couple of statements
Well-
to cover your thoughts.
By blending the needs of both, I think, existing,
You want to add to the?
no, I'm just talking here.
Okay, that's right.
By blending the needs of both the existing commercial that we have and trying to plan for the future, I guess.
I think that's why number 5 on here is a key one in my mind. Residents and businesses need to compromise a unified outcome. So you can blend the residential and commercial needs for a unified outcome.
For a unified outcome?
Sure, yeah. Yeah.
we're just talking about the area deemed South Main Street corridor.
Actually, I think both of those are very complimentary, both of those
Yeah,
statements.
it may capture a couple of thoughts to
Yeah.
change the vision. You don't have to be overly technical. Is this cover kind of what you think you heard? So this one's the community identity. I'll add it there too. Okay, so the next one is the design. I said design and layout. There's a couple of spillovers. If you read the comments, you could say, well, this could be housing. Mixed use could be housing as well as identity or something like that. So I wasn't trying to be too scientific about it. But at least give some categories. 11 through we are 17. I labeled as design. You could call it something else. But what are some of the buzzwords?
Improvement.
Options.
Incentives.
Incentives, absolutely.
Anything else?
Upgrade.
Did you just write identity?
Oh, improvements, kind of the same.
Is that?
Does that say identity?
I think you meant design.
Design.
Design. What was I doing? Community. I'm literally losing it.
That's okay.
Improvement, upgrade.
I heard somebody, did you add one?
What would you say?
Oh, I was gonna say upgrade, but that's kind of the same as improvement.
Enduring or lasting?
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, so if you wanted to sum up the statements, of what you think was heard or direction you wish to go?
I feel like when we're talking about design, not having historic up there is missing. Maybe,
Well,
You
it's
can add it in, it's not.
not on here. Are we,
Not on
are we
there.
It's-
only limited to what's on here?
Well, no, because this isn't like rigid. It's really, it's a feedback from the public, and we're trying to absorb our perceptions and what we're feeling from the public and comparing it to what you're surmising that's coming out of that, because ultimately, as we try to move forward with something, we want to vet it against those ideas.
got it.
Well, and it does say considerations for existing buildings, which I think would take some historic.
Well, I don't think that the community at large had really focused in on this historic direction that we've kind of decided to take this now, so maybe that's not fair to throw up there.
I mean, I think it's pretty easy right here.
Option.
An option should be
Yeah.
truly debated, what you mean by it.
Right.
So as you think about, what are we improving or upgrading? What's the,
What about creating incentives for enduring improvement
Incentives.
based on reasonable options or something like that, you know, like,
Sure.
creating incentives?
for enduring or lasting, either one, improvement. With reasonable, or through reasonable options, or within reasonable option, I don't know, something reasonable options.
I'm going to take another whack at this.
Okay,
So I would look at it and say that we're encouraging improvement by providing options and incentives.
encouraging?
Yep, encouraging improvement
Encouraging enduring
through,
improvement.
I think I'm a little less taken with enduring, because to me that's sort of implied, I guess, that I got I don't know. Encouraging improvement through options and incentives.
Yeah, but I know for me, I kind of would like to see something that is developed that seems to be classic for a long time, right?
Yeah.
And not just,
Okay.
it looks awesome right now, and then in 20 years you look back and you go, man, that is so.
Well, and I
2000.
think that's-
enduring is historic.
Right, I
to
was
a
going to say,
degree,
to me,
too.
that's why I hear historic. Like, we're not asking for fads, and we're not asking
Right.
for. So yeah, I would be okay throwing
Yeah.
encouraging. Yeah, like lasting improvements or. Classic. I like that word.
Classic.
Yeah.
Classic.
Encouraging classic.
Timeless.
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 Ooh, that's a good one.
It's going to be so timeless on our Main Street.
Yeah. Something along that line.
Disneyland's timeless.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a pretty good statement that we can measure ourselves against.
Great.
Any others?
Ooh, timeless is a hard bar. That's a
I was actually
really
going to say it's a high bar right there, but I kind of want to talk about the difference between options and incentives real quick because
Okay.
we did talk about that. I just want to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I would almost think that your options are, you take the incentive route, which is maybe we steer them more toward a historic type of a look. We give incentives for that. That's one option. The other option is take the modern approach with very little a historic element to it, and you don't get really much incentive that way. Those are your two options. That's kind of the way I see it.
I was thinking more about options in terms of taking the handcuffs off existing commercial businesses from what our code is now, right? We want to allow more uses. We want to allow more flexibility and freedom to design things. So that would be the option, and the incentive would be more towards, if you do this many, we'll give you this break. If you elect this many historic options, we might give you that break. That's sort of how I was thinking.
that's good too.
viewed it as well.
Yeah.
And I was seeing incentives as like an incentive for redevelopment would be use list and or zoning and or different things like that. And then the reasonable options, you don't have to use reasonable options, but options of design or use, again, back to use or whatever. So I
Uses.
think the incentives for me was more like incentivizing the whole thing to improve, not incentives in a
Individual.
individual way.
Yeah. I think that those are all completely valid ways to look at it.
Okay.
We can measure ourselves against that. Anything else, kind of addition? I'll refine some of these and
Yeah.
come back to this. We'll give Mackenzie a shot in an English major as her undergraduate work.
I feel like I'm taking one of it's like that nightmare when you walk in to take a test and you haven't studied for it at all, and then you start panicking and or am I spitting out the right answers here because I haven't prepped for it? So this is just real free flow in here, Corey.
Okay. The economic, I picked that one. It was a little bit harder on some of them. My favorite quote still to this day is, what was it? Was it this year? This must not be the one. Where's the one with the kids need a place but nothing illegal or immoral?
I think that's
It
that's
says
the
nothing
one.
legal right there, immoral, but it does say earlier.
Number 4.
4 says youth need to feel safe, need a local place to go, but then it says on 22, nothing illegal or immoral.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I remember that poignantly from the meeting. Youth need to come. I think they were trying to make the intent of that youth go to other places for entertainment. It would be nice to have a safe place for youth to come and go. And the idea was, don't provide something that's illegal or immoral.
I remember a distinct discussion about pool halls.
Yes.
Pool halls.
Professor Poole,
Yeah.
from River City.
But this one is interesting. It's such a mishmash.
Economic was not so easy, but I tried to tie it into some of the uses that they're playing, saying, okay, are they trying to say better economic, more successfully economically?
So
Can we reuse local? I mean,
when I read this, I think of traffic. That's kind of, I don't know if traffic's mentioned, but
Yeah, traffic's in there.
transportation,
its own section.
tourism, the uses are, they want low use, low traffic generation uses.
I see two competing things in these.
Okay, listen.
One, I see sort of allowing market patterns and, you know, that kind of thing. But then I also see local business, it may or may not achieve success kind of thing. Like, this is local business, so just kind of whatever. So I feel like there's sort of this, there's this dichotomy between encouraging market and also just not really trying.
But see, I think that's great. I like the idea of the local business because I think I've mentioned this before where you have the local business. This is where people are going to come and try stuff out. This is where they're going to test things. And sure, we might see turnover because of that. You know, somebody's got a great idea. It's awesome, except nobody likes it. So it doesn't work out. But then every once in a while you'll hit and you strike gold with something. And it's like, this is fantastic. So this is almost like your small business incubator area.
So this is like where Twisted Sugar is now. Is that
Sure.
what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Graphics artists.
I mean,
Yeah.
it failed and failed and failed and failed and failed, and Twisted Sugar is probably not going anywhere.
Well, people might have said that about Galaxy Frozen Custard too, right? Because they were there for a long time.
Those are usually 10 to 15 horizon movements.
Nothing's been there for 10 or 15 years. That corner is the new
Yeah, sorry, I didn't bring that up. Sorry. That's
is the
something
new
else.
Little Caesars. Little Caesar, before it was Little Caesars, was about 20 different things.
Wow.
So I hear a little bit, it was a little more sophisticated in the statement, but Kevin, you were talking about incubator.
Yeah.
Is there a statement like that that you want to reflect? I don't know if you want to be so technical about it, but
Entrepreneur.
Entrepreneurial.
To
Entrepreneurial,
the market-
that's it. Spell that,
The
Corey.
market man. I want to turn it to Logan. I want Logan to take a stab at it because I feel like he does a good job of helping us think about market a lot.
So we're trying to consolidate kind of the comments from the city and boil that down.
Yeah.
Lack. I mean, you look at all of these. I'm just going to jump right in here. Sorry. I know that while you're thinking.
you.
Because all I'm seeing is a lack of cohesion, a lack of direction. A lot of nods, a lot of no's.
don't spell it,
I was gonna
entrepreneur.
say.
Currently, small business entrepreneur opportunities.
Sure.
There are a lot of nods.
I mean, there's not a lot of here like maybe this, maybe that. It's well, I don't want that, and I don't want that, and I don't want that.
But just for FYI, how that influences, is that would influence the type of zoning you apply and building sizes and so forth, if you wanted to keep it more of the incubator and small business. But then there's a competing one. You have competing interest on market.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to override you, Logan.
No, that's right. I would just say when I read this, I get the sense that this is a tough economic spot. There's market realities that are tough, like traffic. There's neighborhood concerns that make it tough, like no gas stations, there's a car wash. There's the code. Substantial conversion may not be feasible. So I think there's a lot that make this particular location a tough place for good commercial development. And so if I were to boil it down, I would just say the sense I get from these public comments is it's economically tough to develop here. And I think they illustrate a lot of different constraints that are faced.
See, that's part of the reason why I love the small business entrepreneurial type of idea here, because big box stores are never going to go here. Never. Not only because of the size, but a chain type thing is not going to go here.
Mm-hmm.
Chains don't like to take risks, really, and it really is kind of a take a risk type of a thing. But you might have a local resident or somebody who's like, I've got a great idea. I'm going to try and make it work. They're going to take a chance.
Yeah, I'd use the word risky instead of tough. I'd go down that road. Risky.
Well, and the other thing I think of when I read all of these is there are a lot of nots and a lot of no's, because I feel like this is an area in the city that residents feel attached to in a way that they can't really describe.
Right.
In a way that's not like, oh, I just always love this or this and this and this. This is definitely it. But they're attached to it because I think it's part of our identity that, and I bring this up all the time, so I'm sorry I'm a broken record, but that a lot of those businesses are locally owned. They're locally owned, like that whole commercial area, I can't remember the percentage, Lisa, offhand, but a lot of them are Centerville or Davis County owned businesses. And I think that people are willing to take a risk in that area because they feel that connection of this area, even if it's not going to be some outsider coming in and investing in this little part of Main Street.
So I agree with these comments. I think when we get down the road, we need to remember these are smaller local business owners who do not have the money, most likely, to maybe put on all of these requirements that we may want for architectural themes, for moving the building, for doing all these requirements, because I agree it's not going to be a big box store. Well, they're the ones that probably have the money that would make it look the way we want it to look.
That's a really good point.
And so if this is being left to, small local business owners, they're probably not going to have the money to put forth to make it be the way we want it to be. So we just got to keep that in mind when we set up these codes or zones or
and
requirements.
I think that's exactly why the current
It's
design
not
standards and
working.
current stuff is not working, is because moving the building, are you kidding me?
Right.
We've heard that from plenty of other business owners who have said stuff about moving the building. We even talked about with the North Gateway when we talked about that. I'm like, that would kill us if we had to do that. So, yeah.
You hear from the Landmarks Commission and they say, wow, what would really help revitalize this area is if we could allow housing, right?
Yeah.
If let's do a commercial building on the bottom and throw some housing up on top, which given current housing crunches, I mean, maybe there is more interest in that. But I think that you make a really good point, Thomas, that if we are going to limit it to commercial, we have to be very realistic about the design standards that we put on. And if we really wanted to get more aggressive, right? If we wanted to drive more design change, I think that we are going to have to be willing to open it up to other incentives beyond just we'll cut you a break on your building permit, and that we may need to allow them to do some type of a mixed use there.
Can you read though? I can't read
Yeah,
the
I got
second
it.
one.
So the first one is encouraging small business and entrepreneurial opportunities. Several factors affect how the market may respond to the corridor's success. Small businesses may be burdened by constraints and regulations.
And I think there needs to be something on there that talks about local ownership of some sort that affects small businesses that are locally owned. Maybe you can just add that in there. In that last statement.
Is that desirable?
Or something along the lines of,
Yeah, I think that it is desirable, Corey. Don't we want our community to be primarily local business owners? I mean, isn't that something that is a good, positive attribute for our community?
well, and it's the attribute of that's the reason why I want to add something about local businesses. It says on 19, on 23, on 24 affects that, what Thomas was saying.
The small
I think that
town
is-
feel.
I think it really, I think it really speaks to what it is right now and what these are saying.
I think that local...
Small business and local ownership is desirable.
I think local ownership is desirable, partly because, well, for one thing, Davis County has the highest percentage of residents who leave the county to go to work every day of any
Yeah.
county in the state. And so if we, little old Centerville, can do our part to help people work
Stay.
at home, close to home, that'd be great. Love it.
Well, this is destination commercial, not because we say so, not because we want it to be, but just because of the realities of where it's located and its proximity to commercial that's more of a draw, your box stores and things like that. I mean, if you think about what's available on Fifth West and Bountiful, and you think about what's available on Parish Lane, we're not looking, there's just not room in terms of the land, or I think the market, to have some other type of environment that mimics either one of those. And so you're looking at your professional office spaces, your smaller businesses, and I think that those by nature encourage or local involvement. I mean, you're looking at locals going to those things, and these are businesses where maybe your location doesn't quite matter as much because of the service you're providing or the business that you are. People will come to you, and so I think that's something to consider as well.
Yes,
So
that's
Isaac, where were you when I was discussing with the groups at large in the past that said, I think Main Street is unique because it has those factors?
We've talked about that.
I get it.
We've talked about that before. I've mentioned the Mandarin restaurant before.
Yeah.
Terrible location, worst location you could possibly get, worst. But they kill it, right? Because of their service that they provide. It's awesome. So I see that type of stuff happening here. Like, it might not be the primo location, but if you get somebody who gets a good idea.
Which is actually, I think, really how South Davis County is in general. You bring in a really nice restaurant. I remember in Bountiful, there was like 3 or 4 burrito restaurants in one location that were great. They're nationally really, really popular. And because they were sort of this different, not local sort of thing for Davis County, South Davis County, they never made it. And then finally, when something went in that was sort of like, oh, this is our identity as Davis County people, it can be wildly popular, even though it's not in a great location, or all these other things have failed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
So I think I covered the gamut, and I'll bring it back to you if you can participate.
I will admit that I was on the fence. I mean, I think I've kind of gone back and forth in my head, right? Like a teeter-totter, because I was originally very much in favor of housing along Main Street, and then I kind of convinced myself over the last couple of meetings that no, we should really keep it commercial, and now I'm starting to swing back to, well, but maybe we really should. I mean, I'm not thinking total housing, total residential
Yeah, not
along there,
revamp
but
the neighborhood.
yeah, but if we do open it up for some accessory dwelling units or things like
So that
that.
leads you to 26 through
Yeah.
28.
Yeah, let's talk about 26 through 28. I'll be honest, I struggle with the whole residential part of it. Like, you've heard me before say, we're either all in or we're all out on residential here. I think we should be all out, but I've struggled with it over the last little bit. Certainly, we had a meeting, I don't know, a couple months ago now where we kind of talked about the idea of, what was it, percentages? What was Logan's idea? Wasn't that your idea? Saying a certain
Square foot
yeah, like square foot
ratio or something.
ratio, that's it. I think if we were to find that right balance of that square foot ratio, we could make it work, because the idea of an accessory dwelling unit above, I don't hate it. But I don't want it to just be all residential or dominated by residential, and then, oh, we're going to throw in the token retail shop below. You
Well,
know?
if you look at successful mixed-use developments, it's usually more than just that they're mixed use. You look at the broader picture, and this is anecdotal, but they're built around something. Whether it's, some sort of public access, some outdoor features, some parks or something, and I don't think we're talking about that here.
Lifestyle center.
Right, and I don't think that that there's the space for it, and I don't think that the way that things are laid out, we're talking about a corridor, or are we not?
Yeah.
We're talking about a corridor, and so to me, it seems kind of counterintuitive or counterproductive to try to adopt this idea of mixed use, where it just doesn't follow the successful model of when and where mixed use is appropriate.
Although I think that mixed use is succeeding in places where there are natural transit corridors where people can live, work, right, hop on the bus and get to work and back, particularly in an environment where you do have a housing crunch, you do have an affordable housing issue. And so if businesses,
Could you redefine it from a mixed-use component, because mixed-use does have a label now attached to it, and it's fairly significant, and something that you are thinking too closely related to front-runner stations and things of that nature, lifestyle center, a transit station, so forth. But is there opportunities to look at residential in a limited fashion? So, you know, one of the things that was discussed before I was even arrived here was the debate about accessory apartments. You know, I learned a certain business had an illegal accessory apartment for a family member in one of the buildings on Main Street. It had no bedroom windows, but the family member was living there. And there was concern with the fire department. And so you may have some small opportunities where some infill, inclusionary, and I don't want to get fancy with it because those are the fancy words, but you could create a detached unit in a deeper lot. So an example would be Larson Electric. You look at the Larson Electric building, it's dated, has a limited ability to be used, could be reinvented as a building itself in its style and reformatted with a few design and still function, but the whole storage yard in the back doesn't have street frontage. And so you're not likely to see an expansion of commercial unless you give them, the market forces drive a large enough facility to be built. But it's deep enough to put a few residential units tucked in behind for housing opportunity. So could you see that in a limited way, rather than saying, we're encouraging mixed use, this is more mixed sector, it's including on a accessory basis, for lack of better terms, or a supplementary basis of a few dwellings that can be tucked into a project.
I mean, I don't think that that's going to drive a huge renovation along Main Street.
No, I don't think
No,
you drive a
I mean,
huge renovation, but you are talking about that if somebody benefited to small upgrade standards and could get a rent rate out of a couple of units, it might be worthwhile.
yeah.
I know Jeff Cook is probably the last of the holdouts in converting the old family home to the corner. He wants to build offices, lease some space, and he actually was going to do what you would think is actually mixed use as a part of that project. Was his goal with the property. He's been kind of hearing the mixed messages about that, particularly after the O'Brien piece failed miserably. So we do have some spaces where some type of residential could be added, but it would be a limited basis in the sense of market forces. It's not going to, meaning you're not going to get a holistic incentive revamp on base, and that's going to be pushed back by what you say density-wise is allowed. If you start playing around, this is density incentivized for redevelopment, it's going to fall flat.
So my question for people who do this sort of thing is that does mixed use work in a sense that's in that location, in a sense that Centerville residents would be comfortable with economically?
I don't think so. I think Kevin, what you mentioned, you'll see if you were to allow it for mixed use, you'll see token commercial and residential, especially at this location along Main Street. But I think if you paired it back and you had accessory dwelling units at some sort of ratio control, I don't think you'd see and I'm just with one group, and I don't want to speak for the whole development community, but I don't think you'd see developers come and buy it out and do a couple of apartments in a big, commercial space. That would go for local owners to probably do.
I was going to say again, though, but that's not necessarily what we want. We're not necessarily seeking out the developers. Developers love you and leave you. The local residents stick around, right? Sorry, Logan.
No. Right Development's been in the city for longer than most of the planning commission.
I don't know, I look at the one Brighton Homes is doing right now on Highway 89 and Center Street in North Salt Lake. They've got 30 townhomes and a fairly large...
It's very similar to what they've done by the station in Layton.
Yeah, and they've got
It's what they proposed on the O'Brien, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I don't know how, I mean, they're selling out, they're still building them. I don't know.
I wouldn't recommend going down the road, though. I think it's just a non-starter. I feel like the citizens have soundly rejected anything over 6 units an acre along Main Street. And
Well,
so,
and you heard the discussion we had with the city council members that came 4 units an acre.
right. So I think if you want to do residential, I wouldn't even let my mind go beyond small accessory apartments on a couple levels.
So do we put that statement? Because it says, what's the role? Residential plays
Well, I
an
would-
insignificant role on Main
Minimal.
Street?
It's
Yeah.
insignificant.
Accessory, tertiary,
Minimal.
Accessory,
Accessory use,
secondary.
secondary use, something like that.
yes.
Well, and I need to remind myself, there are other places where we can work at doing some infill, right? I mean, we don't have to solve all of our housing,
Right.
affordable housing problems with Main Street.
Because again, you feel like a broken record, I feel like a broken record. You know, Pages Lane, the old Dick's, that was commercial, we just gave that up to residential, we're never getting it back for commercial. I think we don't want to give away all of our commercial, because maybe 30 years down the road, we're sitting there going, shoot, we don't have any more commercial left, you know?
So what does that say, Corey?
Oh, sorry. It says residential may play a limited or accessory role on Main Street.
Yeah.
I feel like that's,
So if we do add the component in,
Yes, don't let
the
it drive
idea
it.
is it would be 100.
Well, isn't that why we talked about putting it as the bottom, the
sort of,
last
yeah.
component, so we
Yeah.
could easily,
Excisable.
I
yeah.
think you just kind of reaffirmed that, when we did that finding. But
Corey's like,
softened it-
let's change the page, let's just turn
softened
the
it a
page.
little bit.
He's like, all right, let's go.
Moving on.
So transportation, the last one?
No, long range.
No,
Long range pledge.
Pledge, this was the commitment patterns that I was hearing.
Is that because people feel like we are changing it too often? I feel like giving the existing plan 10 or 12 years and seeing it not work, that's good enough
Yeah.
time.
I mean, a plan is a plan,
Plan's plan.
which are always subject to change
Yeah.
based on who is elected and what the vision is.
So is there any particular principle that this direction would play as a commitment?
Well, I appreciate your comments. I don't know that they are exactly what these are talking about. I think this is more talking about, like, plans, just plans
Well,
in
no,
general.
but I think that what I'm talking about, 31, potential lack of trust. I think maybe the consistency of vision, and I can't remember that comment, where that comment came from originally, but feel like we did hear that from some of the participants that came to those meetings. They're kind of
What
like,
does that mean?
the consistency of vision?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember if that was, because I feel like Jeff Cook talked about, like, you guys are changing it. What do you guys? Yeah, it probably was Jeff. He definitely made comments along the lines of, well, we're going to change it, and then we're going to change it again, and we just keep changing it, right? And so I think he's looking for consistency,
Which goes
Or
along with lack of trust. I
stability.
think.
And I think you're less stable the more closer to controversy you get.
Yeah.
The more what?
The closer you get to controversy or the more you push an issue, I think the less consistent you'll be in the longer, the more likely it'll get overturned sooner rather than later. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah,
If we were to
so,
jam housing down the throat of the city council and say 15 units an acre, it might just get flipped over and you get inconsistency. Whereas if you just realistically look at what we're doing, I think
How would we sum that? How do you sum that?
jam down throat.
I think consistency is a good.
Consistency and
Consistency is a good
stability.
buzzword.
Consistency, yeah.
Conservative.
Thoughtful and deliberate.
There you go.
Much to my chagrin, speed of government is probably safe.
There's one other word I heard in there, I think came from you, Becky.
Oh, I think I said just consistency.
I said conservative, but
it was, Shaylin said
but
conservative.
I'm okay with deliberative.
Yeah, I think is thoughtful.
So we transfer that into a statement such
Deliberate.
as, creating a plan and vision that
Thoughtful and deliberate.
That provides conservative consistency. And
You don't have to work in all of
Support
them.
the troops.
think that it's.
I think the tagline of the more controversy, the more inconsistency there is.
Yeah.
So are we trying to reduce the conflict and rebalance for a consistent outcome?
Yeah.
Well, I think, if you're talking about conflict, you're talking about collaboration, and you're talking about compromise. So I think a long-range pledge is not going to just, I'm not saying conservative isn't a good thing, but there are some people who don't want a conservative approach to Main Street. And maybe we don't hear them at every single meeting, but I think we have to we have to understand that having compromise, this is going to have to be an area with compromise, because there are people on both sides that want different things, and I think being thoughtful and deliberate about it will help create sort of that lack of tension between the two.
Trying to think of, just a second, I lost the spelling. So we're trying to find a compromise. The idea is to achieve a
Consistent through deliberate or thoughtful.
To achieve consistency through thoughtful and deliberate planning.
I'm laughing because on the one hand, I feel like our community is very conservative and they don't want to do anything really impactful or anything that is very bold. But on the other hand, planning sometimes can require a bold
Yeah.
vision.
I threw my
So-
word in.
Well, I do think that there are.
So to find a compromise to achieve consistency for a committed outcome.
Corey, I think another word that should maybe go up there is realistic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the only thing
That's what
I
they're saying.
hesitate to add that in.
Shailene, on your
Yeah.
comment, I just wanted to go on that a little more. I agree. I think that sometimes you need big, bold moves, especially to do the right thing or the best thing. Then the comment I made about consistency, I just think the bolder you are, the riskier it is that it's going to hold. Does
Yeah.
that make sense? Like, I think our reach with Main Street was pretty bold a few years ago. We weren't involved, but when we put that in with the form base and a lot of the different incentives we had, that was a bold move.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it held for a little while, but then we saw the risk and it peeled back, and so, and for the record, I'm all for bold if we want to go bold, depending on the direction.
So I just wrote
I
one
like
way
that.
We can refine it as find a compromise to achieve consistency for a committed, realistic outcome.
Yeah.
I like that.
I like it.
All right.
Okay, the last one, did we get the last one, transportation?
Yep.
I have to write on here, no light rail. That message is still ringing clear in my ears.
Why didn't you write it on the comments?
Because it wasn't in the comments.
I don't think
I'm just
anybody-
remembering it from a long, painful past.
I don't think anybody actually said it.
That's why.
It was just inferred.
Yeah.
It's an understanding.
So what are keywords here?
Like safety.
Safety, yeah.
Access.
Flow or traffic flow.
Walk.
Walkability. Put it down.
Although depending on who you ask, it is walkable or no one walks Main Street. So,
Let's say for walkability may not translate to sustainable walkability.
What?
You're looking at me with this look.
No, I just.
I still stand by my previous statements.
I know you do.
Isaac, are you finding that we really speak our minds on this planning commission?
I know, sorry. Sorry about that.
So any other trigger words? And how would
Safety,
you sum
access,
up
flow.
What we're trying to do.
Should we talk about congestion, or like if we said something like, I don't know if flow is actually, I chose flow, but is that the best word?
Yeah, because I don't think you want to put congestion up there. It's like, what do we envision? I think let's keep
We're
it
trying
positive.
to, okay, that's true.
Well, and I don't
We're trying
know
to
that-
avoid
Yeah,
congestion.
avoid
I don't,
congestion.
yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think we're trying to relieve congestion. I don't feel like it's an
No, we're
overly
trying to
congested
avoid
street.
congestion.
Avoid it. So flow is a good word to
Yes.
avoid congestion.
Yes.
Great.
And safety picks up the bicycle lanes, which I think have been a fantastic addition to that throughway.
And access the bicycle lanes
Yeah.
for that too.
True, access too.
So when you think of access, are you thinking limited access to certain lots or lots of access? You look at Logan, Main Street, their whole goal was access is everywhere, so people have to go slow to slow people down to provide safety, and it just kind of caused congestion. Whereas you limit accesses, it promotes safety because you're not having people turn in and out as much, but then they're going faster, and then you're not, each lot or each parcel isn't quite as accessible. So there's different ways to look at access.
What do you think?
What do I think?
Mr.
Almost
You
Engineer.
said,
Three
Isaac,
parcels
you were the
have
one that
three
said
full
access. What were you
access.
thinking?
3 full.
Well, I was thinking something that, quite simply, people could access. When I think of our public transportation, I think of buses and the future of public transportation as we may know it or come to know it by our the megaplex and the housing that's the higher density housing that's going on out there. And so the word sufficient keeps ringing in my mind too, that we need to maybe remember what we are, Centerville. We talked about us being the city in the middle. And for better or worse, like it or not, I think that is Centerville's history. People are going north or they're going south. And so I just think there needs to be access to the transportation that gets people where they're going. But I don't see Centerville now or ever becoming any kind of a transportation hub where people are coming in on public transportation.
I think you don't support them too.
So from an access perspective, though, thinking about accessing Main Street and accessing businesses on Main Street, we're not going to see, we've talked about this before, we're not going to see, in my mind, a whole bunch more curb cuts on Main Street. UDOT won't go for that.
No.
So we need to think about,
Our engineer.
yeah, that we need to think about access to the businesses, and a lot of times that's going to be either the existing curb cuts that are there or from the side streets. That's where you're going to access the type of stuff is that way. But we need to think about that because the side streets may impact the residential areas if that's the way you access it. Because the residential areas definitely come right up on those side streets.
Which addresses the flow issue.
Flow.
And the
Yep.
safety issue, which is what Thomas said.
Well, just the process through UDOT, if any change of use or improvements, increase of traffic to a project site, they're going to pretty much require you to eliminate any access that's possible, and then they'll make you create a cross-access easement with the adjacent property owner on property line. And so their goal is to eliminate the number of accesses onto Main Street, which is great. I agree with that. So when we talk about uses and stuff, we need to realize it is a UDOT street and that there are not going to be very many accesses on Main Street.
And part of what I recall in the public discussion, and I have to be careful because I can mix up different meetings together. Like I remember somebody standing up and saying, I want to go 45 to get to out of the school to take my kids to school, but that wasn't during this meeting. That was a much earlier time period when we talked about reducing speeds on Main Street. But as I recall, you have a number of offset intersections that are sitting along the corridor. Times at peak traffic, the left-hand turns and movements is compromised. And so there was some concern about how much intensity Main Street can endure that would further compromise the flow of traffic. So for me, we're kind of balancing that, balancing the needs of the success of the business owners so that people can turn and park and go in and shop or get their services. But at the same time, if you raise the intensity so high on the small parcels, you're going to achieve a greater congestion factor.
I don't see Main Street driving a ton of traffic, given the sort of local service nature that it is. What's driving the traffic and the transportation and the flow issues are,
Shut down of I-15.
well, yeah, the shutdown of I-15, and people that want to avoid I-15, because I-15 is crowded because people are building really far west in Kaysville and in Farmington, and it's clogging the freeways. And so now people local are saying, well, it's faster to go down Main Street, which is not anything that we can control.
Well, but you also have to think, not only, I mean, Main Street is not even just busy because people are not taking I-15. It's busy because if I live in Centerville and I want to go to Bountiful and I live east, why would I go all the way west?
Yeah.
I'm going to use a street. I'm going to use 4th East. I'm going to use 2nd West or 4th West that goes into 2nd West, or I'm going to use Main Street. So it's not only like it needs to also, we also need to recognize that it's used mainly, it'll be used for I-15 closures, but it'll be mainly day-to-day used for people that live in Centerville and Bountiful and Farmington.
South Farmington.
That's about it. Because otherwise, or people who live east a little bit more, you know, I don't, I use it every single day. And I live in Centerville. I don't even have to get on the freeway just to go to my friend's house in North Bountiful. You know what I mean? Like, why would I do that? So
The other thing too about the access, I was thinking, kind of along what Thomas was saying, it is a UDOT highway, and you know, I'm sure that UDOT requires all sorts of crazy stuff, but it's not 7th East in Salt Lake where it's 4 lanes in each direction.
Right.
It is what it is. I don't see it getting any bigger than it is. It's west center turn lane, 2 travel lanes, 1 in each direction. So I'm hoping, and obviously you never know with UDOT or something like that, but that UDOT wouldn't put up a big stink about existing accesses, because it's not like you're gonna make a left turn across 4 lanes of traffic to get into a new development. It's one lane.
So it's a Category 5 roadway per UDOT's code, which states that accesses have to be spaced at 350 feet.
Okay.
And so that's
That's our block.
yeah, a block essentially. And so they're first going to look at that and say, do you meet that? And then, well, they can't landlock anyone or not give them access. So they're going to see, is there any way that property can be accessed? And if there's not, then they have to give that property an access. They can't landlock them. But they'll try and do it through easements or through adjacent properties if it's outside of that 350-foot threshold. And then they have, where it's UDOT, they have the option of saying, well, we are giving you that access, but maybe you have to put in a raised median and prohibit left turns in or left turns out. And I don't think it would get to that point with our traffic on this roadway, but
Does the
I've seen them
category
require some weird stuff.
does the category 5, is that determined by volume, by size, like road width, by
It's typically speed, design, and volume.
And the capacity and the demand,
Yeah.
future demand.
There was one thing, UDOT they can no longer eliminate an existing access. If you have an existing access and you come in, I don't think they can make you get rid of it anymore as per HB. I thought you had those memorized, Lisa.
come on, read us mine.
Any change of use, they have a right to look at your
Any-
access.
any
but
change.
Whether it rises to level that they can take is a different story.
I
Yeah.
think it's a change of use or an increase of traffic of 20% or more, then they have the right to do that.
So I wrote real quick, just thoughts I was hearing from you, balancing local business. I put customer, but there can be local business and adjacent residential needs for access with the through traffic flow of the corridor.
Yeah.
And then we'll have other issues that we're gonna address, whether we, the bike lane issues, the sidewalk.
Well, and maybe put something in there about safety.
safety? I think you need
mean,
safety.
And 3 of them talked about, well, 2 of them talked about walkability, so that's why it's up there. 2 of the 5. Maybe say something, you don't have to say walkability, but maybe say something for pedestrian and for all traffic types or something like that.
Multimodal.
Which goes to access.
Yeah. Because then you have pedestrian, bikes, cars, all that.
Yeah. Figuring out a way to make all of those.
All
work a lot.
transportation
Yeah.
access.
Accommodating all.
So I just quickly
Transportation
read,
needs.
Consider the safety of pedestrians and other modes of transportation.
We can just be clear. We consider the safety of the kids walking to the junior high, because that's it.
And no one else.
Well, and the bikers. The bikers that-
Draft up some
And the
standards,
people-
refine them.
Perfect.
I'll bring them back to the commission, you can refine them. And we'll just kind of use those as benchmarks for, and, I mean, because we're not going to necessarily achieve every ideal. So we might say, well, we looked at it, but this value outweighs that.
This was an entertaining and educational exercise, Corey.
Yes. Well, thank you for allowing such.
So I want Logan to plug his ears for a little bit. But Corey, are we gonna get to December and present this to the city council? And I wasn't here when the whole last submittal happened, but kind of have all this work for nothing. I mean, what's your opinion on this?
Cool. Well,
I know that's a loaded
that's a big question.
but
well, that's, to be honest with you, that's
well,
why.
sorry if that's an
To be honest with you, that's why
improper
I
question.
responded a little bit strong to some of the concerns early on in the meeting. At the work session that sat with the council, I don't know if you were on the commission at that time, they liked this direction that we were going. Now, that doesn't mean the outcome necessarily is going to be the same, but they have wrestled with this for 5 years now. So, you know, for me, in my position, it's an issue of desperation. We've got to do something. And it's got to respond to the resistance that has been occurring for 5 years. I agree, there are elements that in the plan and other things, if they could take root, would have been great for Centerville. But it does not have the political will. And so the pushback is achieving a version that takes that conflict away, but does something better than where we are at right now, because there's some movement to just say, leave things the same. We really like the way it is, just how it is, which is really not good planning to the future. So I think there's more success on this one, because they've wrestled it for 5 years. They, for their justified reasons, turned down changing use list until we address this plan. And so to me, this is really a do or die situation. What I do anticipate is if there is some conflict, they would remand some of the conflict back to the planning commission to readjust.
So along those lines, though, Corey, is there plans somewhere along the way to add another, not, I don't want to say work session, but another interaction with the city council to say?
I certainly could. I didn't put it in there. I didn't even think of it when I was typing that schedule. I mean, this is the risk of where the planning commission wants to sit, because right now, we're only preparing draft ideas to present to the public.
Sure.
So at some point in time, we want to say, this is the direction we want to go. And do we want to meet with the city council before we set, here's what we're going out to the public for, to say, is there anything that's just a red flag? So that's an option to do.
We did meet with the city council and present our 5 sort of main objectives, and my understanding was that the general consensus was, yes, this is a good direction.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so I think that
But we could insert
we
a
just
time where you
continue
can
that
say,
way.
this is what our draft is, we're going to go out to the public. Whether we have a work session, whether we let them preview it in advance, but eventually we need to say, okay, to the public, this is our findings to date. And it's not a final decision, because we still have to see what their interest and adjustments that we respond to.
Maybe I said it a little harshly, but I just want to make sure that the next 7 months we spend on this, we're going in a direction that it's going to come to fruition, or at least
I think we're all
get
feeling,
to that,
I think we're
so.
all feeling that
Okay.
reservation. I think you're the only one feeling that. I think we all feeling
Okay,
Which
good.
is, you know, which is why possibly having additional meetings, I don't know.
I would just hate to get to December and be like, oh, let's go back.
It may be wise to consider additional work session or status meetings with the city council, but it also,
I think so. I push on them a little bit to keep their distance, because I do think that there needs to be some autonomy
yeah.
for this
Sure.
commission. So I do have a tendency to push back on the council to give you the space. But at the same time, with useless, we learned what too much space did.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Corey. I don't think there's a problem with us being independent thinkers of the city council. We definitely have demonstrated in the past that we are independent of the city council, but
Yes.
certainly we don't want to go through the whole thing and then feel like we've come up empty-handed again, so.
Well, my understanding is that one of the things that we had suggested to the city council was that they do something similar to what we do in our community development director's report. So I hope that the city council is receiving regular updates of where we're going, so that if we really are going a direction that the council as a whole feels like is just not the direction, that we would get some type of feedback from them.
They'll give a report. You know, the schedule's not hard and fast, but as we accomplish those tasks, they get a report on their agenda of your meeting and what was accomplished. I don't give them a full-on report of what was written. I expect them to look at your agenda and read it. But they'll get a summary report of what you've accomplished.
Thank you very much. I thought that this was a really helpful exercise, Corey. Okay, moving to the next item on our agenda. We are going to continue our discussion of the proposed revisions to the city subdivision ordinances. So Lisa, I will turn the time over to you.
Thank you. So tonight we have Chapter 10 of the subdivision ordinance. And this chapter attempts to address property line adjustments. So our current code already addresses plat amendments and the exchange of title process. But the statutes are a little complicated on whether or not you're doing a lot line adjustment, which are 2 lots in a subdivision, or 2 lots in different subdivisions, but they're platted lots, versus a parcel boundary line adjustment, which is 2 parcels that have never been platted, they're just parcels. And then a question mark process if you want to adjust the boundary line between a parcel and a lot. So I thought it would be helpful in our ordinances to explain more of these options, because the plat amendment and the exchange of title are not the only options. So there's the parcel boundary adjustment, which by state law, we're not authorized to regulate. If people want to move that boundary line between 2 parcels, it says we can't regulate that. But if they're 2 lots, you know, we may be concerned about the easements and some other things, and we can perhaps use the exchange of title process. Since the committee and our consultant drafted this version, there were significant changes in HB 315 in the last legislative session on the land use task force, and the league recommended a lot of changes to the land use section of the state code, and one of those was attempting to fix boundary line adjustments because they were so confusing. You know, every city attorney has their own cheat sheet, but they're sort of different because we all interpret them a little differently. But unfortunately, in my opinion, the result of the statutory amendments are even more confusing. So I've actually volunteered to work on a subcommittee to try and fix some of these. The comment was, hey, you know, a lot of stuff happens at the last minute at the legislature. This was not the language that the league had proposed. There were a lot of amendments at the last minute. So anyway, I wanted to still present this to you tonight, see what kind of questions you have, but before this comes again, we really will probably be making some changes to it, just to, number one, bring it up to today's law, which I find confusing, or run some legislation that, you know, maybe we would propose depending on when we adopt this. But again, there's 3 different scenarios of types of boundary line adjustments, and there's just as many procedures. You can either do a boundary line agreement, you can do an exchange of title, you used to be able to do a quitclaim deed, and then you can do a plat amendment. So there's lots of options, and you just have to line those options up with what you're asking for. And then there's the statutory regulation of whether a city can actually even have any say, which in my opinion, I think we should, because these parcel boundary lines or lot line adjustments create a lot of problems. If people can just go and record whatever they want, they're leaving easements, that don't follow the lot lines, or they may adjust the line so far that they no longer have the minimum lot size, or they don't have enough frontage. They could be creating some non-buildable lots, but I think from the legislature's standpoint, they're saying, hey, that's up to those citizens. If they want to sell a portion of their land, they should be able to. But I think there's some competing interests in there, and definitely some, in my mind, reason for local regulation. But we haven't won all the battles in that arena. So with that general overview and disclaimer, again, I wanted to say in our existing code, so you'll see with each chapter we try to have a purpose statement and then the specific authority, who has the authority under this chapter. And most of these are administrative decisions that we've designated to the zoning administrator. And then, so you'll see Section 040 is the exchange of title procedure, and we've taken this mainly out of our existing code, but we've added to it a few things that we'd like to see, a few more items on the application process. And then on the parcel boundary line adjustments, we're just making it really clear so that, I have my own cheat sheet when somebody calls, and, usually community development will send people over to me and say, Lisa, you figure out which scenario it is and whether we have authority to regulate this or not, but it requires, some title work to find out if they have a parcel or a lot. But I just thought it would be helpful for everybody to actually put in our code that if you meet the definition of a parcel boundary line, meaning there's 2 parcels, that under state law, the city does not have any regulatory authority, and you can go ahead and work with the county recorder's office for accomplishing that. So that's what that new section is on boundary line adjustments. The section 060 on disputed property line adjustments, I think this is one of the sections that probably will have to be amended given HB 315. I often read this statute because I was trying to make sense of the different scenarios, which this uses the boundary line agreement, but it talks about if there's a dispute in the boundary line, like it's not just that we know where it is and we want to move it, but we disagree on it. And if you disagree, then you can record a boundary line agreement where we now say, okay, here's where it is. Under the new statute, the way I read it, it appears that this boundary line agreement can probably be used for more of the scenarios than just a disputed property line. So I can come back and fix that as needed.
Can you also just, in the top, the table of contents is not the same title as 060 disputed property line adjustments. It's
Oh, yeah, boundary
line
agreement.
adjustments,
Okay.
so just,
Yeah, good catch.
yeah.
You've also got 2.060s. Yeah, it just didn't, it's correct in the.
Oh, it's correct in the
index,
table,
yeah,
but not, okay. Good. Okay. Any other comments on page 1 through 4 before I go on to the common and community area adjustments, other than those typos? So on the common and community area adjustments, again.
Thank you, Mayor.
Oh, come on.
Only we find this stuff so exciting, Lisa.
She's wondering why you're leaving now.
We're getting to the good stuff.
I stayed for 45 minutes, I came for a meeting 2 here, and I gotta go take a call.
There you go.
Stay longer, it was good, I was just sitting longer than that, so you guys are talking.
Thanks, Mayor. All right, common and community area
So
adjustments.
common and community areas, again, this is one that I just like, if it's in the state statute, I know people can go find it, but I like it, having it in our own code. So this is a new section, just referring to some procedures that are in the state code, because I think it helps remind us that, oh, you know, there's these new provisions about changing these. There's a statute that covers it, so go look at this or call Lisa. But
I like that.
it's in here.
I like that.
Same thing with the joinder of lots and parcels. These are all statutory provisions that allows, you know, under the state law, that a property owner on their own can join two parcels if they want, and it's not considered a subdivision because they're joining two lots. But
Right.
it does create a lot of problems because just joining two lots, so a lot of times people will join two lots so that they can not have to pay as much in property taxes, because two lots is a lot more than one lot or parcel. So they'll combine them, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they can build right on that lot line, because the lot line will contain easements. So usually when they combine them, we either have to do some easement vacations, or what often happens is when they're ready to build on the second one, they'll go back in, and at that point they have to go through the subdivision process again. So anyway, I just thought it'd be helpful to add that as well. And then the violation section is standard, and the no effect on other land interests is, again, statutory provision, just saying, you know, there's other things at play here. So I thought it was helpful to just continue the process, see if you guys had some questions, get you familiar with these types of boundary line adjustments, because they're not in our code at this point, other than the exchange of title, but I think it'll be a really helpful chapter to have. And we've also divided out, we have a separate chapter just on plat amendments. So I've tried to make just a chapter on these types of issues, and the proposal is to delegate any kind of decisions that we have the authority to weigh in on as a municipality to the zoning administrator. Which I think is reasonable, because we're not given a lot of, you know, we're just making sure that you know, it's reasonable to move the line and they still meet the zoning code, and they're not creating, all of these products are not creating a new lot, so they would not be considered a subdivision. They're just moving where that line is between parcels. So I'm happy to answer any questions or any other typos or changes that you have, I can note.
Oh, looks like we're good, Lisa. Thank
Okay.
you so much.
All right, thank you.
Moving right along, next item on our agenda, the Community Development Director's Report.
And the council report, we've
And
got to
council
be able to
report.
combine them on the agenda, so we'll have to do that.
And just squish them together there for us, Corey.
So we would continue the South Main Street corridor. We would also continue the subdivision. We also received application for modification of a site plan on Main Street. So you'll be seeing that. They're going to modify their landscaping. And then the recommendation, well, you've already done that. The recommendation on the architectural change the council approved, probably not known to you, is that their expiration of their subdivision was last month, or the 24th?
June 18th.
June 18th. They needed an extension, so they went to the council and received their final subdivision plat extension for 6 months, but the PDO controls it to October. But they're planning on recording here shortly, from what I understand. So the city council approved that. That's all I can report.
Corey, the item that we covered last meeting about the accessory building setback standards and stuff like that, did that not go to the city council?
Not yet.
Okay, that's still getting.
It's their
making its way.
July 2nd, is that? July 2nd meeting.
Okay.
Should be a fun meeting. Yes. All right, thank you so much, Corey. And now let's go ahead and revisit the item that we tabled till the end. So we'll review our draft minutes of our meeting on June 12th. We'll do this in the ordinary course, page by page. If you have any corrections, let me know. So starting with page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Not a single one, really? No one?
I hereby make a motion to adopt the minutes of the meeting of the Planning Commission meeting of June 12, 2019.
As unamended.
Unamended.
As unamended.
Second. I can't get
It's
the
been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, guys.